Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to the September 21st meeting of the XDS-conformance API.
Or 20th for those of us on the other side of the date line.
Yes, multiple locations around the world, and that date line keeps chugging around the world every day. We have the API stewards for Envoy here, along with the ii team, to help define what it is that we do when we talk on the wire together. And I think there's been some really cool updates from Zach's side. I look forward to hearing him share, and also listening intently to the feedback from the API shepherds to help steer this in ensuring that the definition is accurate and true.
Yeah. So yeah, the agenda, as in the doc, is pretty small for today. It's basically giving the update to the test harness, and then I had a couple questions that were raised from that. But if there's anything else people would like to talk about, I think we'll have time for it. But yeah, to give the update, I can share my screen, and basically oh, first off, Addie, thank you for the feedback. I saw the comments right before this meeting, and I realized I wanted to, based off of the comments from the feedback from last time, I wanted to be able to have the test be written more verbosely and be able to put logging throughout. And both required changing how the framework actually operated, but I think it ended up being a really strong change. And so I can show that now. I could do this, sharing. All right, so ideally people should see a terminal screen. Cool. So first off, the way the features are written now are with a lot more steps, and so closer to the Google Doc of given a target setup like this, subscribe, receive, and send an ACK to which the server doesn't respond. And then similarly, when there's updates, then it's given a target setup, subscribe, receive, target is updated, we should receive this, and then the client sends an ACK to which the server doesn't respond, and so on. In the main step, I won't go too much into this. It's all in the, like, we can probably discuss this outside the call if people want to see it more, but essentially there's now a couple, like two main services running alongside all of the steps. So one is, and then they're communicating through channels. And so one is just sending requests and receiving responses back from the target. And then we have another one that is this like ACK service that, given those requests, creates the appropriate ACK and sends that forward. And so those are running in tandem as we can move through the steps. And then I've added stronger logging throughout this. So what it ends up looking like is, if we were to just, let me make sure I have this. Yeah. So I have my integrated Go control plane over here. And then if I run Go, right, and so I've got 5 of the first 6 of the like basic CDS tests running now, and they're all doing well. And if you want to break it down, you can always like set a tag for like one that's a work in progress or what have you, and then add the debug step. So /debug. And here you can see the actual sending the request, get the response, sending an ACK, target is updated, then we get a response first, and et cetera. So it's much easier now to trace that the communications is happening appropriately. But this led me to a couple questions, and specifically related to test case 3, which is what to do when you do a wildcard request and then a new resource is added. And the first question is how to structure the wildcard requests, because the documentation of showing, like, essentially you should be able to send an asterisk as the resource you're requesting.
Yeah, so the asterisk thing was added relatively recently to the spec, and I don't think anyone implements it yet. There's a PR for Envoy that changes it to be able to do that, but it will only do that if it has a subscription both to the wildcard and to a non-wildcard thing, even once that PR is landed. So don't worry about the asterisk case yet. If you scroll down in the test case doc and you look at the to-do items at the bottom, there's one in there about handling the asterisk case. For now, let's focus on just doing the legacy wildcard syntax, which is what basically everybody uses today, which is just, leaving the resource names field empty in the request.
Okay. So I think my confusion is, according to the protocol, of sending the appropriate ACK, because if I understand it correctly, if I start with a wildcard request, so it's just an empty resource name, and there's resources A and B, and then I get those resources back, should I? Oh, and then C gets added, and I want to be able to receive C as well. And so, if I was reading the protocol correctly, the way that you should structure that ACK is to have A and B, and also the wildcard, to show that you're still looking for wild, like it's still a wildcard subscription.
No. Okay, so you can think of a wildcard as the client is saying to the server, I don't know what resources I need, but you know, so I'm going to trust you to send me all the ones I want, right? So you can think of this as the server has some custom business logic on it that when it receives this special wildcard request, it knows magically through some out-of-band mechanism, could be like knowing the client's IP or, something in the client's credentials or, whatever, or just hard-coded, right? Doesn't matter. It knows through some out-of-band mechanism what set of resources the client really means when it requests the wildcard, okay? Now, the set of resources that a client is subscribing to is independent from the set of resources that actually exists, right? So forget wildcards for a moment, right? Let's say that you subscribe explicitly to resources A, B, and C, and only A and B exist, right? So the server will send you A and B, and C doesn't exist, so you don't get anything. You treat that as non-existent. And then somebody adds C on the server. Well, the client is actually still subscribed to C, so the server just sends C to the client at that point. Like, one way of thinking about this is does not exist is actually a special value of the resource. And the server's responsibility is to notify the client of any change in the value of the resource during the window in which the client is subscribed to that resource. So if I am subscribed to a resource X, if that resource goes from exists to does not exist, that's a change the server needs to inform me of. If it goes from, does not exist to exists, that's also a change the server needs to inform me of, right? But it doesn't change the fact that I'm subscribed to it, whether or not it exists at the moment. So in the context of a wildcard query, the fact, like, if the wildcard expands to A, B, and C doesn't happen to exist right now, then fine, I'm only going to get A and B. If C springs into existence, the server just sends C. The client doesn't change anything about what it's subscribing to. The client is still saying, I'm subscribed to the wildcard, and the server is telling me what I need to know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I'm still confused on the correct ACK that the client should be sending. So for the wildcard, if there's only A and B, and the initial request, the initial subscription is a wildcard, and the server sends back A and B, and I want to ACK that.
So when the client, so ACKing and the resources that you're subscribed to are actually completely independent of each other. So when you send an ACK, you are ACKing a response that was sent, but it is like in the wildcard semantics, you subscribe to the wildcard, the server sends A and B. That doesn't mean you include A and B in your ACK, right? You're not changing what you're subscribed to. You're still subscribed to the wildcard. A and B are the resources the server sent back in response to that wildcard subscription. So the client doesn't like send a subscription for A and B just because the server sent A and B in response to the initial wildcard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so as long as the client is sending like the updated version and nonce, it's still saying I've got this message, but
correct.
It's the resources it's subscribing to should, unless the client means to adjust it, you don't need to adjust it based off of the response.
Correct. The set of resources that the client is subscribed to will never change based on what the server sends back. Well, I mean, I suppose I should. It may happen indirectly in the sense of like, you know, if you have an LDS resource that's pointing to an RDS resource, and then that LDS resource, you know, changes to point to a different RDS resource, then it'll, you know, then the client may change which RDS resources it's subscribed to. But like within a given resource type, just because the server sends back that a resource does or does not exist, you know, that does not change the set of resources of that type that the client is subscribing to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. So I'll adjust the that portion of the loop, and so I think that that's going to lead to, yeah, that'll work. I'll be able to set up test case 3 better, because I was,
awesome.
Yeah, it was not working for me, but I wasn't sure which side it was related to. But the only other question I had at the moment was, throughout the test cases, it would say, you know, set up like this, and then resource A is updated, or you have resource A and B. A is updated. What's conformant is that B should also be showing the next version for, like, if I'm understanding it right, like if you've got version 1 for clusters and one of the clusters is updated.
Which case are you talking about here?
Like 4 and 5, or 5
4
specifically.
and 5. All right, 5 specifically. All right, so server has resources A and B, client subscribes to A and B, returns A and B, right? Client sends an ACK, server gets updated, contents for A, response thing. Right. Yes. So the version in the state of the world variant, the version is a is basically a property not of individual resources, but a property of all resources of a given type, right? Mm-hmm. So if you if you're subscribed to 2 resources and one of them changes, that bumps the version for that entire resource type.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so my question, and it's more of like a style, I guess, is whether it matters the way in which, like for testing, the way in which that initial resource is updated. I was going to, like, I wanted to, yeah, like for example, resource A's connect timeout is adjusted in some sort of fashion or whatever. And whatever the adjustment is, whether or not that really matters for testing, as long as we can see that the version info for that resource type has increased. And when that happens, then the server should be sending a response.
So you're asking if it matters, like what field in the resource we change?
Yeah, because I was going to just basically have a, like, when resource is updated, and always updated the same way with just an arbitrary field, like connect.
I think that's actually totally fine. From the perspective of the transport protocol, the contents of the resources are opaque. It's just a blob, and so it really doesn't matter what field you change, as long as you change something.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's all the questions I have, and they're answered well. Awesome. And I did a big quiet PR or whatever for all of this stuff, because I wanted to get the underlying stuff set. But from now, this point, I should be able to set up PRs for each test so we can have better discussions on that. So apologies for doing it this way for right now, but there was too many changes that I needed to do before we could have a adequate discussion.
No, that's awesome. This looks like great progress. Yeah, I wish I'd had time to look at some of the code. I haven't. Well, I don't speak Go anyway, so that might be a problematic thing. But certainly the structure of the test looks really good.
Awesome.
I would just add that one of the comments I gave you is basically what you asked in the second question, which is for Delta XDS, the incremental mode, you will have a per resource version. So I would suggest to take that into account when designing these tests, just because first of all, we need to state somewhere in these tests that we're running in state of the world mode and not in Delta. But other than that, just the test looks okay to me, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, there's
awesome.
in the test spec doc, one of the to-dos is tests for incremental protocol variants. I figure once we get the state of the world stuff nailed down, we can flesh out the equivalent tests for incremental.
Just a quick question. Is any of these, say, the test scenarios or the utilities you're writing? I assume some of these we plan to reuse for Delta XDS, right?
Yes. I think more than likely what's going to look like is the same type of function, but we'll have Delta in front at the beginning and then taking a look at the two and figuring out how to make them more generic or like more easily generic. Right now, because like I've got a lot of functions to reuse for like generating the appropriate discovery requests and responses and such. But with Delta, because the structure of the request is different, like the type is different, it would mean like either if else's in each one of like looking for the Delta flag being sent, or to just have explicit Delta test that has some when running Delta or in the Delta, and the Delta being added will adjust how GoDog is doing the regex pattern, which will then pass it to a specific Delta function. Is how I'm imagining it right now.
Okay, thank you.
One question I have is regard to the to us moving to the Delta, and this is with regards to how we do tagging. Is the description and function matching the same, Zach? Or would we actually change the flow? Because if it's just changing the gherkin side, would a tag be sufficient? And inside the same function matching, like this, it'd still be the same function matching, but within that matched function, checking the tag of the current test so that we do different logic?
I don't think so.
Okay, fair.
One thing to keep in mind, and I can't comment directly on the sort of how the code breaks down because I haven't looked at the implementation that Zach is working on here. But functionally, we're likely to have like the set of tests that we have in the doc right now for state of the world, we're likely to have like duplicate that, and then like each one will be slightly different. I don't know that we'll be able to run like the same set of tests against state of the world and against incremental, because the expectations are actually different at the protocol level, if that makes sense.
And yeah, to show, so one thing that we have now is this ADS flag that's being added. And so ADS is like for testing state of the world or whatever, it's the structure of the test is going to be the same. It's just whether I'm doing a call to a CDS service specifically, or if I'm doing a call to ADS with clusters as the resources. And so in that case, generally the test would be the same, or maybe the YAML that I'm setting is slightly different, but otherwise the test is the same. And stuff like that, then this flag works. And I have the flag set, so let's see if I can see if this is actually working. So let's say that only scenario 2, for whatever reason, is an ADS scenario. So I can add that flag to it. And then should work. So this is only going to be running the, I would say ADS only. And this would only be running the ADS tests. I could set that to ADS off or ADS on. It's ADS on by default. And when it's ADS on, perfect. When it's ADS on, it's going to be running through all tests, whether they're tagged with ADS or not. Otherwise, it's skipping. If you have ADS set to off, it will skip all the ones that have been tagged with ADS. And I think I didn't do the Gherkin tag just right, but that's the general idea. I think yeah.
I think, one thing that might be useful is to, in principle, there could be some servers that, support only ADS. There could be some servers that support only non-ADS, and there could be some servers that support both. So, I don't know if the intent is like, well, for a server that supports both, you just run the test suite twice, once in ADS mode and once not, or if the intent is that like you can have a mode where you run every test against both ADS and non-ADS, right? Either way is fine.
Yeah, that's one where we can, have it be just set as a flag, and I'd imagine that the user who is wanting to test their implementation, they would just add that flag if they know that their particular one doesn't have ADS set. Then we're not going to try that. But Delta, it's unique enough that the tests, as you were saying, like should be distinct.
Yeah, and for Delta also, there's both aggregated and non-aggregated versions. So just to make things interesting.
Yeah, well, just to note, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just to note that the ADS is basically we'll only see it taking into account when you have multiple, let's say, CDS, LDS, EDS. When you're accessing multiple resources, then you'll basically see the ADS coming or not coming into play.
I mean, that's true, Adi, but actually, even if you're only requesting one thing, the actual RPC method name is different. So if we're testing conformance, we do want to run all of the tests, even if an individual test case only covers one resource type, we still want to run it against both endpoints to make sure that it's, doing the right thing for both.
Yes, right. I forgot about that. Thanks.
Since nobody's talked for a few seconds, I just want to say, this is awesome.
Absolutely. I was just about to say, I've looked at the code and this is awesome. And Mark, you do not need to know Golang to look at, like, Zach is a wordsmith and he does it with human language really well. And in him picking up a brand new language and learning how to wield it extremely well, it's a beauty to read. I would highly recommend this to go read through it. Because yes, the results are impressive, but the way in which it is written is equally impressive.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for that. Happy to hear. It's definitely beginning readers go or whatever, but it works.
So I guess one question I would ask as far as going forward. So you said you've got through the first, what did you say, 5 test cases, something like that?
Yeah, though it's more of the issue that I was having was I wanted to be able to have an update happening while the steps were going, or have a step detail that an update was happening, and also to have the final send an ACK and the server doesn't respond. And the way that I had written the test before and the harness before weren't set up well for that. And I was having to mangle the language to get it to work. And I wanted the Gherkin language to match this as closely. And so now that I went through the first 6, I think, and just was like can I show this as close to as showing here and have it work here? Which is not to say that it's an actually good test necessarily, but the sketch of it does work. And so what I'd like to do now is open up a PR for each of the tests, basically. And then you can have a discussion on the test, because there's one like the good feedback of when I'm requesting resources A and B, it would be good for the target to have A, B, and C, so that the response, we can check that it only includes A and B. Right now, it's too easy for that test to pass, for example. And so I would be moving through them.
One thing that's a little tricky about that specific example is the protocol doesn't define what resources match the wildcard, right? That decision is totally up to the server. So in principle, the fact that resources A, B, and C all exist on the server does not necessarily mean that they will all be sent in response to a wildcard. That's totally up to the server implementation, right? It might be that the server has existing resources A, B, and C, the client subscribes to the wildcard, and the server makes a not incorrect choice to say, I'm sending you A and B because that's all you need.
Oh, sure. This would be for like test case 4 and 5, in which the client is requesting specifically A and B. And so it should be getting A and B. And in that, it would be good for the target to have more, so that we know it's not just sending back a wildcard request. It's responding correctly.
Good idea. Yes. Excellent. So, very good idea.
Yeah. Not mine. That was Addie. And so thank you for that. But it's stuff like that that is good to be talking about each test case distinctly, so that we can improve it and double check that the harness works. Right now, the basic brushstrokes of it all is working. And so I feel stronger now about doing the PR per test.
Okay, awesome. This all sounds fabulous. So the reason I was asking about sort of moving forward is, I guess I'm trying to get it seems like, Adi is reviewing your code already, and my time is already incredibly overcommitted. It's not that I don't want to look at your beautiful code. I'm just skeptical that I'll find time to do it in the near future. So what I do want to make sure is that we don't block you on, so we've got a good set of test cases sort of defined now, and you'll be working on these. I want to make sure, but we have a bunch of to-dos of like additional test cases we know need to be written, we just haven't gotten to yet. I want to make sure that we can sort of pipeline this so that we can start, I guess my question is, at what point are you going to run out of test cases and start needing some of those additional ones to be, sort of fleshed out, right? I want to make sure that I'm not blocking you in that regard.
I don't think so. No. Yeah, I think especially moving into the RDS and EDS, and also making there's already quite a bit here. And also there's some subtleties with the, where am I at? Here, for all tests. Ensuring that this is working correctly. There's some subtlety there that will keep me busy, I think.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So then what I guess the best way to move forward then is let's sort of rely on, in these meetings as we move forward, or of course, feel free to ping me offline as well. You don't have to wait for a meeting. But when we start to get to a point where you're like, I don't have that much work left to do on the tests that are already defined, we should start working on defining the rest of them. Let me know about that, sort of sooner rather than later, so that we can, make sure to start, talking about which ones we want to do next, and fleshing those out and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. This is great. I'm really excited to see this, actually, turning into something tangible. That's great.
I've been impressed not only with the code, but also the ability just to check out the repository and run one command and have everything work and show the test scenarios running. It's spinning up all the appropriate things, and the debug flag, just adding that, being able to see where we can go through and understand when things fail. Because the one thing we were worried about in the beginning was what if it breaks? And I think that Zach's done some really decent groundwork in making sure that when we get there, that it'll be a lot easier for us to figure out what happened when unexpected occurs.
Awesome. The other thing that just occurred to me that we should, it might be premature to do this now, but if we've got some test cases that are like really running and doing the right stuff, which it seems like we do. Have I mentioned excited? I'm Fusheng, I'm wondering, I think one of the real tests of this framework is going to be like, can it work for two completely different XDS servers that we're testing conformance of? And I think Traffic Director is sort of the next obvious candidate here. Fusheng, I think you're probably the right person to, once this is in a state where we can actually run some test cases against, a sort of a generic target, to write an adapter for Traffic Director and run it against it and just sort of see if you run into any problems, or how hard is it to actually make it work for a new target, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, we will find time and resource to do it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think we should probably at Google we do quarterly OKR planning. OKRs are essentially quarterly goals. So I think Fusheng, we should probably if you can take a Q4 OKR to either do yourself or find a minion to to do this, I think we should definitely. I would really like to see this run some tests against against Traffic Director in Q4, just to as a validation that it can work for something other than no control.
For that, so are we thinking putting the test suite, importing the test suite to Google and run internally, or actually expose this adapter service publicly so that
I don't think I care. Either implementation should be fine, right? Whatever turns out to be easier for I know behind the scenes TD has a lot of, it's not like a single server. It's got its fingers in a lot of places. There's a lot of dependencies to stand it up and run it. So if it's easier to stand up the adapter as as something that we run somewhere and then point the test suite at it, I'm fine with that. If you can rig up an environment internally where you can run it in a sandbox environment, that's fine too. Whatever is easier, I don't think it matters.
For the sandbox, then basically we just somehow import the open source stuff into Google, right? Okay.
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. We'll have a discussion on those.
Okay. Cool.
Zach, your code's about to run inside of Google. All right, cool. We have anything else we need to figure out here? Looking forward.
If not, I think I'm already late for another meeting. So
thank you for being you and for everybody bringing their best. And I look forward to us getting together again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, thank you all.
Sounds great. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. See you soon.